Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to be taking a look at the Week 4 NFL slate on DraftKings. We're going to go through each position, and I'll hit on a couple guys that I like at each position. Guys that are going to be core plays across all my lineups, just some of my favorite plays for this Week 4 NFL slate on DraftKings. We'll talk through the slate, talk through each position. I'll give you some of my thoughts, where I'm going to be going. Before we do look at the slate, though, and look at some picks, would really appreciate it if you guys would drop a like on this video. Feel free to let me know down in the comments who are some of your favorite plays for this Week 4 slate, any guys that you're going to be considering. If you think I missed on someone, if you think there's somebody that could really have a big game that I didn't touch on, feel free to leave that down in the comment section below. Like I said, I would appreciate it if you would drop a like on this video. Make sure you click that subscribe button as well if you are new to the channel. I was looking at my YouTube analytics, and about 40% of the people who watch my videos are not subscribed. So make sure you are subscribed, click that notification bell, so that way you never miss out on any of my new videos. Have a ton of content coming out for you guys, uploading NFL videos just about every day. Going to have NBA videos up all NBA season once NBA starts, which I'm very excited for. So really would appreciate it if you guys would subscribe. But we'll go ahead and start off at the quarterback position. We'll hit on a couple of quarterbacks that I like. We'll talk about some other guys I'll be considering. We'll pretty much do that at each position. So starting off at quarterback, a guy that I really like in that 6K range is Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, 6,100 on DraftKings, I think is in a very favorable spot this week going up against the Cardinals. The Cardinals defensively so far this year have just been terrible. Everybody's been scoring on the Cardinals. I expect the Seahawks to pretty easily be able to put up some points in this game. Great spot for the Seahawks. I'm going to have a lot of exposure to pretty much all their guys. Like at quarterback, I think Russell Wilson's a top play. At running back, I think Chris Carson's a very strong option at only 5,700, especially if Rashad Penny remains out, then Chris Carson's a very strong play. You could obviously go to Tyler Lockett, who I think is a good option. You could stack him with Russell Wilson. At tight end, Will Dissly's really, really cheap, and I think is in a very favorable matchup. So the Seahawks are going to be a team we're going to want to get exposure to, and I think it starts with Russell Wilson. Russ, one of the more efficient quarterbacks in the league, gives you a great ceiling in this matchup, gives you rushing floor. Wilson does have the ability to run. He'll run 5, 6, 7 times, get you those extra rushing yards, which just adds to his ceiling and gives him even a higher floor. In cash games, I'm probably going to try and get up to Russell Wilson if possible. We'll talk about another guy that I really like that's cheaper that if I can't get up to Wilson, I'm fine going down to him. But I do like the spot a lot for Russell Wilson. Definitely going to have exposure to him in tournaments, and if I can get him in cash, I'll try and do that. But I think the guy I'm probably going to be going to in cash because the savings are so good is Daniel Jones. He's only 5,300 on DraftKings. He's definitely my favorite value quarterback, like below 6K. There's a couple guys that are viable below 6K, and I think Daniel Jones is my favorite at 5,300. I imagine he will be one of the more popular quarterbacks on this slate, so if you want to go away from him in tournaments, I think that makes a lot of sense. Quarterback is never usually a position where you have a guy like major chalky. Like usually highest on quarterbacks around like 20%. You usually don't get quarterbacks like 30, 40, 50% owned in tournaments just because it's such a variant position. Like even the highest projected quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson could put up really big games of like 30 fantasy points and not even be the best quarterback on the slate because you'll have guys that are cheaper that can put up 20, 25 that are $2,000 cheaper. So just talking about value at the position, I think Daniel Jones is a top option. He looked great in his debut last week versus Tampa Bay. He threw for 300 yards and 2 passing touchdowns, also had 2 rushing touchdowns. I believe he finished with just short of 40 DraftKings points. I think he was the highest scoring quarterback on the slate. Daniel Jones crushed last week. I expect him to do well here at home against the Redskins. Great matchup, great spot for the Giants in general. And like I said, the price tag is just way too cheap, especially for this home matchup with the Redskins, 5,300. Daniel Jones should not be this cheap. He should be around 6K. So he's a quarterback that I'm going to be going to quite a bit. Probably going to be the guy using cash games, and I'll still have exposure to him in tournaments as well. But other guys I think that are in consideration for me this week, Phillip Rivers for 6,200 against the Dolphins, I do like quite a bit. Just 100 more than Russell Wilson. He's someone that you could look to go to. There's a couple other values I like. Jacoby Brissett at home against the Raiders, I think is in a very favorable matchup, and for only 5,400. He does stand out as a value play. And although Case Keenum looked terrible Monday night against the Bears, I think Case Keenum for only 4,900, very cheap against this Giants defense, this really bad Giants defense. There's a lot of plays I like in both sides. of this Giants-Redskins game, and if you need a really cheap quarterback, I think Case Keenum is a viable option for only $4,900. So those are just kind of a couple of quarterbacks I'm looking at. We'll go ahead and move on to running back. So at the top of this position, the guy that I'm trying to pay up for on this slate is Christian McCaffrey. He is my favorite running back to spend up between Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, and then you have CMC. Those are pretty much the only three spend-up options we have on this slate because I believe the Saints play on Sunday night, so that takes Alvin Kamara off the board. The Cowboys play Sunday night as well in that game, which takes Ezekiel Elliott off the board. Then Saquon Barkley's hurt, so we don't have him as an option either. So really you have between three guys to spend at running back, and if I have to choose one, I'm going with Christian McCaffrey here. The dude's just a beast. He's a total stud. Texans do have a good run defense. I would say this is not the greatest matchup for McCaffrey, but he can just do so much offensively. Just through the run, he can get it done. He can get it done in the passing game, and that is a spot where the Texans have struggled this year defensively, is in the passing game. Their secondary is not very good. I believe they have allowed a lot of receptions to running backs this year as well, and we know that's something that Christian McCaffrey excels in, catching the ball out of the backfield. So I really like McCaffrey here. He's a workhorse back. He's not going to come off the field if the Panthers are down in the red zone, if they're down on the goal line. Christian McCaffrey is going to be the guy that's punching the ball in. In pass down situations, Christian McCaffrey is going to be on the field. A true workhorse back, and the guy that I am trying to pay up for, probably going to be in my cash game lineup for sure. And even in tournaments, I still want to have a lot of exposure to Christian McCaffrey at 8,800. Definitely the top projected play on the slate, in my opinion. But now a couple more running backs I'll be looking to. One guy I like in that low mid-range is Kerryon Johnson. He's only 5,400. Really good matchup here for the Lions, I think, at home against the Chiefs. We know the Chiefs offensively are really, really talented, really, really good. They're going to put up points, but their defense has struggled this year, especially against the run. They have had one of the worst run defenses this year. So this is a great matchup for Kerryon Johnson. The price tag, in my opinion, is just too cheap for a guy that should probably get close to 20 touches, if not more than that. Only concern I have with Johnson here, given the matchup, is the fact that KC could get up in this game. KC could have like a 10, 14, 17-point lead. And if that's the case, do the Lions pull Kerryon Johnson off the field? I don't think they will, but he hasn't been involved that much in the passing game. In pass down situations, he usually doesn't get a ton of targets. Through 3 games this year, he's only averaging 2 targets a game. So that's my main concern, but I still think Kerryon Johnson is going to get plenty of carries early on in the game. And even if they do get behind, I don't think he's just going to be completely off the field. I think he'll still be out there. For third down situations, I don't know if they'll have him out there on the field because they do have other running backs on their roster they could look to for pass down situations. But I still really like Kerryon Johnson. I like this matchup a lot for him. I like the price tag as well. At home as well, I think very favorable spot and a guy that I do like in that mid-range. I don't know if he'll be in my cash lineup, but in tournaments, I am definitely going to have exposure to Kerryon Johnson at the price tag of $5,400. But another guy that I really like for value is Wayne Gallman. He's only $4,600 on DraftKings. Honestly, don't know what he's going to be owned this week. I'm very interested to see what his ownership looks like and just what other people are saying about Gallman. I have a feeling Gallman's not going to be that popular because I feel like people are going to try and talk themselves out of Gallman. They're kind of like last week with Nelson Aguilar. Like people were trying to find ways to not play Nelson Aguilar. I feel like that's going to be the same way this week with Wayne Gallman. With Saquon Barkley out for the next 4 to 8 weeks, Gallman's going to be the biggest beneficiary. He should see his workload increase a lot. He should see his role increase a lot. Right now, as I'm recording this video on Wednesday afternoon, the Giants really don't have a backup running back that they can give work to. They have Elijah Penny on the roster, but that's pretty much it. So assuming the Giants don't sign another running back, Gallman should be looking at a heavy workload, probably going to see nearly 20 touches, if not more than that. He's involved in the passing game as well. He can catch balls out of the backfield. That's something he's always been good at. When Saquon Barkley went out a few games last year, I believe, Gallman averaged 11 or 12 PPR points the games that Barkley was out. So he can get the job done. It's a very favorable matchup as well at home against the Redskins. He's 4,600. He did see a price increase. If they would have played on Sunday night or something and Barkley would have got hurt, then Gallman would probably still be 3,500. So DraftKings did adjust the price. I think that's going to keep his ownership down a little bit, but I still really like Wayne Gallman here. I think he's probably going to see close to 15 carries. He's probably going to get some targets as well. If they get to the goal line, I imagine Wayne Gallman will be the guy punching the ball in. Assuming the Giants don't sign another running back, I think Gallman should be looking at a heavy workload. And at 4,600 on DraftKings, I think he is in play for me this week as a value running back. But there are a couple other running backs I want to talk about. Marlon Mack for 6,100 at home against the Raiders. I really like in that mid-range. Definitely going to be someone I have some exposure to in tournaments. Chris Carson as well. Assuming Rashad Penny still remains out, I think Chris Carson is going to see a lot of work for 5,700 against that really bad Cardinals defense. Chris Carson's another guy in that mid-range that I think is a very strong play. And then if you want another value running back, sort of a pivot away from Wayne Gallman, James White I don't think is going to be owned at all, but I do like James White here against the Bills. I expect him to see a lot of work in the passing game. I know he's had some big games in the past versus the Bills. He's only 4,900. James White's always a viable play on DraftKings with the full PPR scoring, and I do like him as a value under 5K. But those are just a couple running backs I wanted to hit on. So let's go ahead and move on to receiver. Talk about my top receiver on the slate, Keenan Allen, 7,600 on DraftKings. This dude's just been absolutely balling this year. He's been probably the best wide receiver for fantasy. I don't really think it's close. So far through 3 games, he's gotten 42 targets, which is just absolutely insane. He's coming off a monster game where he went for 13 catches, 183 yards, and two touchdowns, had like 46, 47 DraftKings points. Now he gets a matchup against the Dolphins. The Dolphins secondary is absolutely terrible. They do have Xavier Howard, who is a good corner, and I would say is really their only good corner, but Keenan Allen does play a lot in the slot. He moves around a lot, and I don't think Xavier Howard's going to shadow him. Howard's probably going to be on Mike Williams, who plays outside, so this is a very favorable spot for Keenan Allen. The fact that he's still 7,600 just baffles my mind. I don't know why he's this cheap. He should be like 85, close to 9K with how good he's been, especially when you factor in the matchup with the Dolphins. Chargers should easily be able to put up points in this game. Right now, they do have one of the higher implied team totals. I think it's around 30 right now as I'm recording this video. So great spot for the Chargers. Great spot for Keenan Allen, one of the top receivers on the slate. Going to be in my cash lineup for sure, and I'm going to have a ton of exposure to him in tournaments as well. But now a couple other receivers I really like, a couple of value guys I want to touch on. Curtis Samuel, only 4,600 on DraftKings, I think is a really good value option here. Only a 1-game sample size so far this year with Kyle Allen at quarterback, but Allen was looking Samuel's way a lot. I know DJ Moore only got 2 targets or so with Kyle Allen at quarterback. Greg Olsen got a lot of targets, but it was mainly Olsen and Samuel and McCaffrey where Kyle Allen was going to. Last week with Allen at quarterback, Curtis Samuel had 5 catches for 53 yards and a touchdown, had like 16 DraftKings points. It was his first game with Allen. He had 7 targets as well. This is a play that I think really stands out when you're just talking about projected volume, projected targets for the price tag. He's still way too cheap at 4,600. I think DJ Moore is like 1,200 more than Curtis Samuel, which just really doesn't make much sense to me. I think Samuel's a great value receiver. It's a great matchup against a bad Texans secondary. Texans pass defense has really struggled this year. Really good spot for Curtis Samuel, and I like him a lot given his DraftKings price of only 4,600. But then the next guy we're going to talk about, I expect to be probably the most popular receiver on the slate, and honestly might be the most popular player on the slate. That's Terry McLaurin. He's only 4,500 on DraftKings. He's the best wide receiver value play on the board. I don't think it's really close. He's going to be very popular this week, like I said. But this is just too good of a spot. His price tag's broken. I don't know why he's 4,500. He should not be this cheap for how good he's been this year. It's a great matchup against a very bad Giants secondary. McLaurin see 24 targets through 3 games this year, so he's averaging 8 targets per game. He's scored in every game that he's played in this year. Case Keenum's getting him the ball, and now he gets a great matchup against the Giants. I thought McLaurin was going to struggle a bit in that Monday night game against the Bears, but he really didn't. He still had 18 DraftKings points, had 6 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. Terry McLaurin's just been awesome this year for the Redskins, and the fact that he's only 4,500 makes him a top value receiver. I think in cash games, he's one of the first guys you put into your lineup. For tournaments, I still want to have exposure to him, even though I imagine he will be very popular. But a couple other receivers that I'm going to be targeting this week that I'm probably going to have exposure to in tournaments. Sammy Watkins at 6,700, I really like a lot here against the Lions. Watkins has surprisingly been playing in the slot a lot this year, so I imagine he will be able to avoid Darius Slay, and that's a very favorable matchup for Sammy Watkins. Slot receivers have had a lot of success against the Lions this year, so I do like Sammy Watkins quite a bit. I think Sterling Shepard, now with Daniel Jones at quarterback, is going to be a receiver we see have a lot of success rest of season. I like his matchup with the Redskins. So for 5,800, he's another guy I'm going to get exposure to, and I'll for sure have some Daniel Jones, Sterling Shepard stacks. And then lastly, a very cheap receiver that I think is in play is Preston Williams. He's only 3,900 on DraftKings. I believe he saw 12 targets last week for the Dolphins. Josh Rosen was targeting him a lot, even though the targets weren't very efficient. I think he only had like 4 catches out of the 12 targets, but the targets are going to be there. The Dolphins are going to be trailing a lot this year. They're going to be playing from behind. They're going to be forced to throw. So if you need a really cheap receiver, I think Preston Williams is a viable option at just 3,900 on DraftKings. But now moving on to tight end and hitting on a couple of guys I like here. Starting off with Evan Engram at 5,700. Probably one of my top projected tight ends just behind Travis Kelce this week. I believe he's $1,500 cheaper than Kelce, so that's going to be really good savings you get going down from Kelce to Engram. Evan Ingram's been balling this year. Even with Eli Manning at quarterback, he was putting up pretty big games. He's coming off a monster game last week against the Buccaneers where he went for 6 catches, 113 yards and a touchdown, got 8 targets from Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones was getting him the ball a lot. Like I said, he was putting up big numbers with Eli at quarterback. Now with Daniel Jones at quarterback, who you expect to be better than Eli, you can only expect the numbers to be better for Evan Engram. For guys like Sterling Shepard, they're going to be putting up big numbers rest of season. So I really like going to some of these Giants guys. I love Shepard. I love Engram this week. I love Daniel Jones. I think Gallman's a good value running back. Have a lot of appeal on the Giants side. Really good matchup with the Redskins, like I've been saying the whole video. I think the Giants are going to be able to put up some points here. And Evan Engram at tight end is one of my favorite plays at 5,700. But another guy that I really like at tight end, a really good value option that I imagine will be popular this week, is Will Dissly. So Will Dissly's 3,600 on DraftKings. I would say that he's probably the best value tight end below 4K. There aren't a lot of guys below 4K that really are appealing, but Dissly is definitely an option that I will be going to. Probably a guy that I'll be looking to for cash as well because of how cheap he is. Great matchup against the Cardinals. The Cardinals have been getting torched by tight ends this year. In Week 1, they got torched by the Lions and T.J. Hawkinson. In Week 2, they got torched by Mark Andrews and the Ravens. And then in Week 3, Greg Olsen had a really big game against the Cardinals. I expect Dissly to probably have a decent game as well. 12 targets the last 2 weeks while getting 3 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. He scored twice in Week 2, also got into the end zone in Week 3. The Seahawks did just trade away Nick Van Ness, who was their backup tight end. So I expect that just secures Will Dissly's workload even more. It's going to mean that he's going to be on the field even more. I expect him to probably get 5, 6, 7 targets. He'll get looks in the red zone. And with how bad the Cardinals have been defensively this year, and with how bad they have struggled against tight ends, I think Will Dissly is a top value option at tight end for just 3,600. But there are a couple of other guys I want to hit on. Darren Waller has been absolutely balling for the Raiders. For 5,200 against the Colts, I like his matchup a lot. The Colts are another team that has really struggled to tight ends this year. Austin Hooper just went off against them in their most recent game against the Falcons. I expect Darren Waller to have a pretty big game. I do like him at 5,200. And then Delaney Walker for 4,800 against the Falcons, I think is another tight end that you can consider, a guy that's going to be in my player pool. But that's kind of where I'm looking to for tight end, just a couple tight ends I like on this slate. Now we'll talk about defense real quick before we end the video. So a value defense that I really like is the Panthers. They're only 2,300 on DraftKings. Defense is always a tough position to predict. I pretty much say this in all my videos, but it's a really hard position to predict. I usually always try and find a cheap defense that I think can potentially get sacks, maybe force some turnovers, maybe get a lucky pick 6 or something. And I feel like that could be the Panthers this week. The Texans' offensive line has just really struggled. Always in the past, they've really struggled. Deshaun Watson has gotten sacked a lot throughout the past, and so far this year, he has taken a lot of sacks as well. Going cheap at defense is going to allow you to pay up for the studs that you want. Like, paying up for a defense is usually something I never do. I think the most expensive defense this week is like the Chargers for $3,800. I would just rather take $1,500 in savings, go down to the Panthers, and then upgrade a position. Like $1,500 could allow you to get from like Todd Gurley to Christian McCaffrey. So I usually always go cheap at defense. I think my favorite cheap defense this week, even though they're on the road, I do like the Panthers quite a bit. I think they're going to be able to sack Watson a little bit, maybe force a couple turnovers, and could be a really good value defense. But there are other defenses that are in consideration for me. The Rams at home against the Bucks. Jameis Winston, we know how much he'll turn the ball over, especially when he's on the road in a tough matchup. So I think the Rams are a viable defense at 3,500. I think the Ravens at home against the Browns are very viable. The Browns offensively have just not looked that good this year. Kind of a disappointment. The Ravens are in a very favorable spot, and they're at home as well. So they're another defense you could look to. And then the Broncos below 3K as a value defense, a cheap value defense for only 2,900 at home against the Jaguars. I expect that game to be pretty low scoring between the Broncos and Jaguars. Broncos at home in Mile High have always played much better, and their defense usually always plays much better at home. So I could see looking to them as a value defense. But that's kind of where I'm looking to for defense this week, guys. I think that is pretty much it for the video. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. I really do appreciate you watching. Don't forget to drop a like on the video. Let me know down in the comments who are some of your favorite plays for this Week 4 slate. If you have any sleepers, any guys you think I missed on, feel free to leave those down in the comment section below. Make sure you subscribe, click the notification bell so that way you never miss out on any of my new videos. I would really appreciate it. And that's pretty much it, guys. Good luck this week. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.